My last podcast about Jeffrey Epstein was over 6 months ago, and I'm amazed in all that time how little has happened. Guilty men walk free. I'm Larry Fedoruk, and this is Later That Same Life. On each episode of my weekly podcast, a different topic, discussion, commentary, or story from our lives.
Season 19, Chapter 12.
Epstein
Files,
Part
2.
The last time I talked about the Epstein files here, my basic premise was that if all those files did not implicate the rich and powerful, they would have been released months ago. Well, they have since been released, granted in dribs and drabs, names redacted, other names not redacted that should have been, literally millions of documents that dealt with the minutiae of daily lives and not the issue at hand, news outlets reporting that Elvis and Marilyn Monroe's names came up, even though they were dead a long time before any of this. They just came up in conversation. Who cares? It's such an overwhelming flood of data that people seem paralyzed to act. My updated premise now is that if the Epstein files didn't implicate the rich and powerful, someone would have been arrested by now. And by that I mean someone else. The last person arrested in North America in connection to the Epstein files was Ghislaine Maxwell in the summer of 2020, that long ago. The only other person to be arrested was, in fact, Jeffrey Epstein, about a year before that. As we know, Jeffrey didn't make it out of prison, didn't make it to trial, found dead in his cell in August of 2019. As the guards say at the New York City Metropolitan Correctional Center, well, we'd better get to work. These prisoners aren't going to hang themselves. Police in Florida first opened up an investigation into Jeffrey Epstein, allegations of sex trafficking of minors, in 2005. In 2008, he pled guilty to a diminished charge, was sentenced to 18 months in a minimum security prison, one where he was allowed to go home during the day and only check in every night. And in fact, he was released after serving only 13 months. He theoretically carried on his sex trafficking while doing time. What was to stop him? Nothing. So are we supposed to believe that Epstein and Maxwell ran a sex trafficking ring for 30 years, involving hundreds if not thousands of rich and powerful men, yet the only two arrests that authorities can manage are that of Jeffrey and Ghislaine? Maxwell got 20 years in prison. Trump sent his one-time personal lawyer, Todd Blanche, who had somehow become Deputy U.S. Attorney General, to depose her in jail, after which she was suddenly transferred to a minimum security prison in Texas, where apparently she has even extra benefits when it comes to food and accommodation. She recently got deposed again, this time by a committee, took the fifth on almost every question, i.e., no answers. Then later, her lawyers demanded her release based on time served. Then there's always the possibility that Trump may pardon her. Would he be that crazy? Well, what makes you think he is sane at all?
Would you consider a pardon or a commutation for Ghislaine Maxwell if she
It's something I haven't thought about. It's really something.
Recommended it.
It's something I'm allowed to do it, but it's something I have not thought
But you
about.
wouldn't.
No other arrests. Ever. All right, well, what about the former Prince Andrew? Well, that's the UK. And right now they sit in juxtaposition to the US. The UK, as a nation willing to stand by the principle of no one is above the law. Incidentally, as I was writing this, I noticed a typo. It's a bit Freudian. My typo said that no one is about the law. And then I realized, yeah, that's the Trump administration right now. That's America. No one seems to be about the law. In the UK, no one is above the law. At least so they say. Andrew was stripped of his prince and duke titles last year by his king and his older brother, Charles.
We're finished. You're out of the family business. That's your punishment.
Andrew was kicked out of a British royal property and exiled to Sandringham. That is an English country estate personally owned by the royals and not the British government. The government owns most of the castles and palaces and the royal jewels. Andrew gets a monthly pension from the Royal Navy, same as any other British bloke, and who knows, Maybe the family gives him an allowance to keep him in tea and crumpets. Maybe Andrew has some personal wealth. After all, Andrew has long been suspected of using his royal position for personal gain. He and Sarah Ferguson seemed to live a lavish lifestyle even beyond royal standards. But no one could prove anything. And for that matter, I don't think anyone even tried. Hands off the royal family, unless, of course, it's a sex scandal. Hey, remember Sarah Ferguson and the French billionaire and the toe-sucking scandal? It was in all the tabloids. It was after her separation from Andrew. Seems she got over Andrew pretty quickly, moved on with her life. And Andrew, well, remember he was Randy Andy. That was his nickname. Randy, a British expression meaning sexually active, amorous, lustful. Andy likes the birds. Randy Andy. It was a joke. Not so funny now. Oddly, Andrew's arrest, though connected to the Epstein files, was not over sexual misconduct. The Epstein files may have revealed that Andrew exhibited misconduct in a public office. Remember, Andrew was once an appointed representative of international trade and investment, a made-up cushy title for a largely made-up cushy job. But it did give him access to a lot of confidential business information, and that could be used by others for profit. If so, that would be illegal. It's one thing to cash in on favors here and there. That's just business, right? But this new allegation, well, that would be like Andrew betraying his country, a crime punishable by life in prison. Look up there in the Tower of London. That's Andrew peeking out from behind the bars. At least his arrest is something. Andrew was already implicated sexually by Virginia Giuffre, the underage girl who appeared in the famous photo, the one Andrew claimed was a fake. Andrew settled for cash out of court and continued to deny guilt. She named him in her book. Giuffre died by suicide in April of 2025. Though one can scarcely imagine the stress and trauma and pressure a victim such as her would be under, suddenly there's another death related to the Epstein case, another needless death. Very suspicious. After all this time and all her bravery, she decides to end it. Well, again, we don't know the trauma she faced. At least Charles had the good sense to strip Andrew of all of his titles. And now British police are investigating. Hey, but before we go ahead and make justice heroes out of the Brits, let me point this out. Andrew was exposed as a pedophile years ago. No police, but suddenly when they realize, you may have been messing with our money, well, then it's send in Scotland Yard. They either just inadvertently exposed their priorities, or maybe it's like Capone or OJ, we know we can't get you on the thing we know you did, so we'll try and get you on something else. Maybe. I don't know. A series of events are strange. In America, nothing. As a matter of fact, a lot of people connected to the Epstein case seem to get promoted. Alex Acosta, the state attorney that gave Epstein that sweetheart Florida deal, he went on to become Trump's Secretary of Labor. It was during the Donald's first term. He resigned that post in 2019, saying he didn't want to be a distraction. Howard Lutnick, a neighbor of Epstein's in New York, who had changed his testimony a few different times on how well he knew Epstein, where they had met. Well, he is Donald Trump's Commerce Secretary. Kevin Warsh, listed in an event at Epstein's home in St. Bart's, nominated by Trump to be chair of the Federal Reserve. John Phelan, whose name appears on an Epstein private jet flight manifesto going to the island, appointed by Trump as Secretary of the Navy. There's Steve Bannon, once the chief Trump strategist, and Elon Musk, who led Trump's Doge. And they're all in a series of friendly emails with Epstein. Musk, in an official denial, issued a statement that if he wanted to party with young girls, he wouldn't need Epstein's help. Hardly the denial that one might be looking for. Then there's this guy, though not directly related to the Epstein case. He was the manager of the Kit Kat Club in New York. Paolo Zampoli. The Kit Kat was allegedly where Donald met Melania. Paolo apparently introduced them. She frames the establishment as a place where people of all ages and social standing gathered for lively conversation. Most people say it was a dark, creepy place that smelled like a strip joint, where billionaires went to meet young girls from Eastern Europe who at least might pass for 19. Paolo Zampoli ran the club and a modeling agency. Huge quotation marks around modeling agency. That agency brought the girls in from Europe. In 2025, Donald Trump appointed Zampoli as United States Special Representative on Global Partnerships. Don't ask. No one knows what that means exactly. Sounds a lot like Andrew is a representative of international trade and investment. What a mess. And anyone who might be anxious to investigate all of these people, this should include the Department of Justice, Homeland Security, and the FBI. But they are run by sycophants of Trump. Pam Bondi, also once the Attorney General of Florida. There's Kristi Noem and Kash Patel. And they seem to be mostly saying, hey, nothing to see here. Move on.
All right, move on. Nothing to see here. Please, Pittsburgh. Nothing to see here, please.
Who else closely connected to the Epstein files got promoted? Oh yeah, there's Donald Trump. America decided to make him their president. Twice. And Donald Trump thinks it's time for all of us to talk about something else.
Are you still talking about Jeffrey Epstein? This guy's been talked about for years. And are people still talking about this guy? That is unbelievable.
And he keeps saying that he's been completely exonerated. He is not.
I have nothing to hide. I've been exonerated. I have nothing to do with Jeffrey Epstein. They went in hoping that they'd find it and found just the opposite. I've been totally exonerated. In fact, Jeffrey Epstein was fighting that I don't get elected, and I've been totally exonerated.
Republicans line up behind him with MAGA hats defending him. You know, every time I see one of those large groups standing behind him in the Oval Office waiting for the TV photo op, I always wonder, you mean none of those want a Julius Caesar, this fat bastard, right now? Brutus, where are you when we need you? It's ironic that the right wing are the ones who came up with Pizzagate in 2016. Remember? They claimed that high-ranking Democrats were running a child sex trafficking ring out of the basement of a Washington, D.C. pizza restaurant, the Comet Ping Pong. Conspiracy theorists claimed that the emails of one of Hillary Clinton's assistants were actually coded messages. The owner and many patrons of the restaurant received harassment and death threats. One day a man came into the place and began firing shots with an assault rifle. Since, multiple law enforcement investigations have completely debunked this wild allegation. Pizzagate. But yet, faced with mounting hard evidence in the Epstein files, at least half of America continues to say, Trump, he's our man? Should the Biden administration have done something about this? Well, yeah. I mean, so should have the first Trump, or even Obama, or Bush, or Clinton. Well, okay, not so much Clinton. But no one did. I believe they feared the political ramifications. What if somebody from our side is in those files? Well, the files contain people from all sides. This should not be about politics. This should be about people. Everything about this story is bizarre. Ghislaine Maxwell, daughter and favorite of British media entrepreneur Robert Maxwell, who lived and died mysteriously and thought possibly to be an Israeli intelligence agent. Was he? Was Ghislaine also an agent? Was Jeffrey Epstein? You know, guys, your job is to gather dirt on our friends and our enemies, and we'll use it as it becomes necessary. And if you can't gather dirt, create some. I don't know. People have talked about this. We do know that Robert Maxwell's fortune was seized by the British government. leaving his children, including Ghislaine, penniless. Or so we thought until last year. In 2025, it was proven that Ghislaine and her siblings were benefactors of secret trust funds, foreign real estate investments, and other hidden assets that made each of them multi-millionaires. So where did Jeffrey Epstein get his money? Where did a middle-class New York kid, a failed community college instructor, get billions to fund his lavish yet nefarious lifestyle? Palm Beach and New York mansions, private jets, yachts, your own island, the Zero Ranch in New Mexico, the most recent property under investigation, another hub for his pedophile activity. In a sidebar crazy story, at some point, a trust connected to Epstein and the Zero Ranch claimed a Powerball lottery ticket that was worth some $85 million. But where did Epstein get his billions? From Robert Maxwell? Ghislaine? Well, maybe. It is known that as Epstein rose through the financial industry ranks, he gained the confidence of Les Wexner, the billionaire founder of Victoria's Secret. Wexner was recently deposed by authorities, including some Democrats on a committee, claims he was scammed by Jeffrey. A shrewd businessman who builds a huge empire gets scammed? Well, I guess it could happen. But scammed to sign over complete control of your money to Jeffrey Epstein? Giving Epstein complete power of attorney? What did Epstein have on Wexner? Nothing. I was scammed. Well, that sounds more than just stupid. It sounds suspicious. Everything is suspicious. The death of Ivana Trump, Donald's first wife, a healthy 73-year-old woman, once a professional alpine skier, suddenly one day could not navigate a staircase in her home that she's probably walked 1,000 times? Was Ivana eliminated? Evidence? None. Just suspicion. My theory is that Melania is a key figure in all of this. She was on the scene in the days of the Kit Kat Club and the modeling agencies. Shortly after hooking up with Trump, she was miraculously fast-tracked for U.S. citizenship and visas for her family to join her in America. But don't worry, I don't think there's any ICE raids on Mar-a-Lago coming soon. I think she knows something. How else does she get a multi-million documentary about her life with a major release to theaters? Directed by none other than Brett Ratner, who just happens to be one of the names who keeps popping up in the Epstein files. What does Melania have? A series of documents, pictures, video, copies of which are in envelopes in the possession of several confidential lawyers, with a reminder to Don, anything happens to me, those envelopes get put in the mail to the media outlets. Evidence? None. Suspicions? Plenty. Because nothing sounds too bizarre when it comes to this crackpot. I sometimes think the only reason he even ran for the highest office is to be able to use his presidential leverage to keep himself out of jail on pedophile charges. He doesn't care about the economy, tariffs, Greenland, Gaza, Canada, illegal immigrants, Venezuela, Iran, the Board of Peace. None of it. He only cares about himself. And all the rest of this is simply to keep the Epstein files out of the daily news cycle. Evidence? None. Suspicions? Plenty. Hey, I've already given you plenty of evidence. And unlike many people, I've also admitted to all of those items which are only theories. But Trump is a madman. He's so mad that even these theories sound plausible. Think about that. And you know where the evidence is? The Epstein files. It's there. If only you had a Justice Department willing to do their job on behalf of the victims, on behalf of the American people, on behalf of the rule of law. We can applaud the fact the former prince got arrested, but until the self-appointed King of America is brought to justice, it won't be right. And it's not just him. I don't care what side of politics you're on, what your religion is, or how you run your life in other areas. Anyone guilty in this matter should pay heavy consequences. Victims form support groups, and they plead on media almost daily, and it's like no one hears them. I just signed up for a newsletter called The Ink. I recommend their series, The Epstein Class, where you have to ask questions like, why in the first place was a person with no qualifications, simply born into a royal family, given a high-level job like trade representative? Why is a manager of a sleazy nightclub negotiating global partnerships? Why no arrests? In larger terms, what is the system of power that even allows an Epstein to exist, and for all those years, and all those in his sphere to escape justice, while the rest of us in society feel helpless? And how much more do Americans need to see and hear before they decide that enough is enough?
Later That Same Life is written, voiced, and produced by Larry Fedoruk. LarryFedoruk37@gmail.com. Subscribe to Larry's podcast YouTube channel. Get automatic notifications with each new episode.